Serenity Valley Stories introduces The Woods Beyond Pinebrook. I've lived in Pinebrook my entire life, a small town nestled on the outskirts of a vast forest that stretches out as far as the eye can see. It's a place where everyone knows each other, where the biggest news is usually someone's birthday or the rare occurrence of a lost dog. But the woods, those have always been a different story. They've got a reputation, one that's whispered about in the school hallways and around campfires. But being a teenager with a taste for adventure, I never put much stock in those stories. That was until last summer. My name is Jake, and back then, I was 17 and itching to spend as much time as possible outdoors before school started up again. Pinebrook's forest had always been my playground. I knew every trail, every hidden creek, every secret spot where you could catch a glimpse of deer or spot a hawk circling above. But there were some parts of the woods even I hadn't explored, the deeper, darker areas where the trees grew so close together they blocked out the sun. And, of course, there were the stories, of strange sightings, of people hearing things that shouldn't be there. That summer, something felt different. It started with little things, things that were easy to dismiss at first. I'd be out on a hike and notice that the woods were quieter than usual. Birds would stop singing abruptly, and I wouldn't hear the usual rustling of animals moving through the underbrush. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. One afternoon, while I was out exploring a new part of the forest that I hadn't ventured into before, I stumbled across something strange. It was an old, overgrown trail that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The trees on either side were thick, their branches tangled together like gnarled fingers, creating a canopy that blocked out most of the light. The air was cooler here, and the smell of damp earth was strong, mixed with the faint scent of decaying leaves. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the trail. As I walked, the silence became more pronounced. Even my own footsteps seemed muted, absorbed by the dense undergrowth. I pushed through the thick brush, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and unease. The deeper I went, the more I felt like I was entering another world, one that was untouched by time. After about 20 minutes, I noticed something up ahead, a clearing. My pace quickened as I made my way toward it, eager to see what lay beyond the trees. But as I stepped into the open, I stopped dead in my tracks. The clearing was dominated by a massive tree, its trunk wider than any I had ever seen. Its bark was dark, almost black, and it was covered in strange markings, deep scratches and gouges that looked like they had been made by something with enormous claws. The ground around the tree was littered with bones, some small, like those of birds or squirrels, but others much larger. My stomach churned as I realized that some of them looked like they could have belonged to a deer, or something even bigger. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck, and I suddenly felt very exposed, like I was being watched. I glanced around, but there was nothing, just the dense wall of trees surrounding the clearing. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the markings were probably made by a bear, and that the bones could have been left by some predator. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I turned to leave, but as I did, I heard something, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze, listening. The growl came again, closer this time, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. It was a sound that didn't belong in these woods, a sound that was too deep, too primal to be from any animal I knew. Panic surged through me, and I bolted back the way I had come, crashing through the underbrush as fast as my legs would carry me. The branches clawed at my arms and face, but I didn't care, I just needed to get out of there. I could hear something behind me, something big, moving through the trees with heavy, deliberate steps. It wasn't running, but it was fast, faster than anything that size should be. My heart pounded in my ears as I burst out of the overgrown trail and back onto the familiar path that led home. I didn't stop running until I was out of the woods and back in the safety of my neighborhood, my lungs burning and my mind racing. I didn't tell anyone what I had seen, not at first. I wasn't even sure if I believed it myself. But the image of those scratches, those bones, and that growl haunted me. A few days later, I convinced myself to go back. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know what was out there, that I needed to see it again. I brought my friend Sam with me this time. He was the only person I trusted enough to share what I had found, and I figured that with two of us, we'd be safer. We made our way back to the old trail, my heart pounding harder with each step we took. Sam was skeptical, teasing me about getting spooked by a raccoon or a deer, but I could tell that as we got closer to the clearing, he was getting nervous too. The forest was just as silent as before, the air thick with tension. When we reached the clearing, it was exactly as I had left it, the massive tree, the strange markings, the bones scattered around. Sam's joking demeanor vanished the moment he saw the scratches. He knelt down to examine the bones, his face pale. "Jake," he whispered, "what the hell did this?" Before I could answer, we heard it, the growl. It was louder this time, closer, and it made the ground vibrate beneath our feet. We both jumped up, our eyes wide with fear. The sound was coming from the direction we had just come from, blocking our only way out. "Run," I breathed, and we did. We sprinted back down the trail, the sound of something massive crashing through the trees behind us. It wasn't just following us, it was hunting us. I could hear its breathing, low and heavy, and the snap of branches as it moved with terrifying speed. We didn't stop until we were out of the woods, panting and soaked with sweat. Sam looked at me, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "What was that?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, still trying to catch my breath. "But it's real. And it's out there." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness, felt the weight of its presence bearing down on me. I knew I should tell someone, but who would believe me? And what could anyone do about it? The police? The town had one deputy, and he spent most of his time dealing with lost pets and parking tickets. The next few days were a blur. I tried to avoid the woods, but Pinebrook is surrounded by them. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being watched, like it was waiting for me to come back. And then it did. It was late in the evening, the sun just dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town. I was walking home from Sam's house when I heard it, the same low growl that had haunted my dreams. My blood ran cold, and I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound was coming from the edge of the woods, just beyond the tree line. Slowly, I turned, my eyes scanning the darkness. At first, I saw nothing, just the familiar outline of trees, their branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. But then, in the fading light, I saw it. A massive figure, standing just at the edge of the forest, half hidden by the shadows. It was tall, at least 8 feet, maybe more, and covered in dark, matted fur. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, reflecting back at me like a predator's. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. I was too scared to move, too scared to even breathe. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. It looked like something out of a nightmare, a creature that shouldn't exist, and yet there it was, as real as anything else. And then it took a step forward. That broke the spell. I turned and ran as fast as I could, my feet pounding against the pavement as I sprinted for home. I didn't dare look back, I didn't need to. I could hear it behind me, its heavy footsteps growing louder with each passing second. It was faster than I was, and it was gaining on me. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The only thing that mattered was getting away, getting to safety. The houses flew by in a blur, the streetlights casting long, distorted shadows across the road. I could hear its breath now, ragged and deep, so close it felt like it was right on top of me. Finally, I saw it, my house, just a few yards away. I pushed myself harder, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I practically threw myself at the front door, fumbling with my keys as I tried to get it open. Behind me, the footsteps grew louder, closer, until I could almost feel the creature's breath on my neck. With a desperate shove, I finally got the door open and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, my entire body shaking. For a moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my heart in my ears, and then, silence. The creature was gone. I don't know how long I stood there, too terrified to move, but eventually, I worked up the courage to peek through the window. The street outside was empty. There was no sign of the creature, no hint that it had ever been there. But I knew better. It was out there, somewhere, waiting. And it would be back. That night, I barely slept, my mind replaying the encounter over and over again. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, made me jump, convinced that it was outside, watching me. When morning finally came, I felt like a shadow of myself, exhausted, jittery, and haunted by the knowledge that something was out there in the woods. I didn't go back to the forest after that. Not for a long time. Sam and I stopped talking about what had happened, but I knew he was as scared as I was. We weren't the only ones, either. Over the next few weeks, there were reports of strange noises coming from the woods, of pets going missing, of people seeing something big moving through the trees. But nothing concrete, nothing anyone could prove. Eventually, life in Pinebrook went back to normal. The stories died down, the strange occurrences stopped, and people began to forget. But I couldn't. Every time I walked past the woods, every time I heard the wind rustling through the trees, I was reminded of that night. Of the creature that shouldn't exist, but does. I've thought about telling someone, really telling them, but what good would it do? Who would believe me? And even if they did, what could they do about it? The woods are vast, and the creature is smart, elusive. It knows how to stay hidden, how to avoid being caught. So, I keep it to myself, living with the knowledge that there's something out there, something waiting in the darkness of the woods. I don't go near the forest anymore, not even during the day. And I don't go out alone at night. Because I know, deep down, that it's still out there, watching, waiting. And someday, it might decide to come back. Thank you for listening to Serenity Valley Stories, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below, share with your friends, and check out the other stories on the channel.